So we start with setting up our custom grid, and then our layers, and then of course our reference squares that we'll use for each icon. Notice that the Transform Align Pathfinder window is now available. I'm going to drag that out and show you how I did that by going up to Window, finding Align, and then dragging that towards the very bottom to where I see that blue line underneath Layers, so that I have that available. So that way we can match up our reference grids boxes later. You know what I mean when we use it. So the next part is to set up our measurements for this file. So let's do that. We'll go up to Edit, and then down to Preferences. You can go to General, but my suggestion, we're only going to change the guides and the grid. So let's just go to Guides and Grid. See that General is there. So we want Guides and Grid. Grid lines, we want every 1 pixel. I think by default this is 20, maybe 10. It could even be 30. But we only want 1 there. So we'll highlight that and choose 1. And then tab down to Subdivisions, which I think is default to 4, but just change it to 1. I have mine at home set. Guides are cyan lines, and it shows the cyan color there. And the grids are custom color, whatever that is. I'm assuming it's a gray or pink lines as well. The grids will be in back, and the pixel grid shows up only if we zoom in really far, above 600%. Click OK. Click or on your keyboard, hold down Control, and then choose 0 on your keyboard to do a full screen look like this. We want to make sure that we have this saved, so Control S if you have not done that yet. Control S for save. The next part is we want to set up our layers for this project. It starts off default with just 1 layer. We need a total of 6 according to Mr. Stefan. So we'll come down to the bottom. The little Create New Layer icon looks like a piece of paper folded. We want to add by clicking on it 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So we have a total of 6 layers. Layer 1, the very first one we started on, I just click on it. I'm going to double click on it and rename it Reference Grids and hit Enter to apply that name. Layer 2, according to the tutorial, says Battery. So again, I'm double clicking, typing in the name, and then hitting Enter. The next one is Settings. Then Messaging. It could be Chat, but I think the tutorial says Messaging. Then this is Alarm. And then the final one is Photos. So once we name these layers, we want to do a quick save. So Control S to save often. And we next want to lock the layers that we're not wanting to draw on yet. So right next to the eyeball, that's the one that toggles the visibility. We want to click in that little space there to make the little lock icon show up for each of those layers except for reference grids, because this is the layer we're going to be working on now. Control S, since we made some changes, and let's actually begin to draw the reference grids that we'll draw the icons inside of. To do this, we'll need to go to our rectangle tool on the left you can just type M like Metzner for your rectangle tool. Remember these, if you click on and hold them, you get other options. All right, that'll be handy later. So we want a rectangle, and we want to change the color of the inside part of the rectangle. So there's two ways to do that. One is to use the presets up here. So this is your fill, or the inside part, and this is the stroke or outline part. These are presets. We actually want to set up some that the author, Mr. Stefan, used. So let's go to the fill color here, this square, and we want to double click on it, like a fast double click. And he tells us for the reference grids, he wanted an orange color and gave us the color of F15A24. And I'm just typing that down here. That's a hex color. We'll click OK. And now see that our preset changed? And also the stroke. He doesn't want us to have a stroke for this. So let's do the preset drop down for stroke, and we'll choose none. Now we have the color set. We have the rectangle tool selected. We'll double click in the center of our artboard, and we want to choose the size of the outside or the larger square. He states he wants 96 by 96 orange square. So we type in 96 for width, 96 for height. Sorry about that. This is not chosen. This constrains or keeps those measurements together. Sorry, we want 96 for both. We want to not have those locked. So that little slash through the paper clip is fine, or slash through the link. Click OK, and you get a square. It actually will say rectangle over in your layers panel here. Okay? Once you have that done, do a quick save. And the next part, we're going to add the inner part that looks like it was deleted or erased. So we'll go back to our rectangle tool, and we'll double click in here again. Actually, I don't want to do that, because see how this is selected? Let's just make another rectangle first. So rectangle tool, we'll double click, and the inner square for step 2 under the how to create reference grids, he wants 88 pixels by 88 pixels. And I just type those and hit tab and then OK. Now, I know this is the wrong color. We need to come over to our fill color, double click on that. And then for step 2, he says use the 6 Fs. So I type those in and hit OK. And we make sure that there's no stroke. Perfect. Now, we want to put these two together. I know the first thing you'd probably want to do is to move it with your mouse. Please don't bother doing that, because that takes longer. That's why we use this align down here. So if you haven't brought that up yet, please do. And once you have your align panel, and again, that's the window align right there. Once you have that down here, we're going to align these two together. Notice that the rectangle up here is above the orange rectangle. That's actually right, because we're going to use this to cover that. But they're not the same size. So we want to come down. If you have this where it says align to, by default I think it says selection, but we want to align it to the artboard to start. If you don't have this, please don't worry. You can still align them together. But I'll show you two ways to do that. So in this case, I want to align them at the center points. It's not distribute, sorry, align. So that's align in the center and align in the middle of the artboard. You can do the same thing with the orange rectangle. Notice I just switched it right here. I chose the target right there. sorry, and then center, middle. Okay, so we've got center and center. So if you come up here to the selection tool, just hit V if you want on your keyboard, and then click away. When I say click away, I mean click somewhere other than on the objects. You'll see now that it looks like just a square. You could have just set this up yourself with one, but we wanted to know how to do this because I want you to understand how to group icons together or graphics together. Speaking of that, let's do that. With the select highlight, that's the dark arrow, not the white one, the dark one. Click and drag across them to select them both. So we have both of those selected right there. And they say rectangle, and it says reference grids. And you want to use Control G, like group, to group them together. And notice it changed it to a group right here. If you click on the expand, you'll still see them right there. So we didn't get rid of them, we just grouped them together. That's going to be very helpful later. Control S to save. And the next part, which is step 3 on page 4 of the PDF tutorial, is group the two squares, which we did, and then create copies about 24 pixels from one another. The 24 pixels does not matter too much. He did that so that you could zoom into each one a little bit easier. I did say I would show you another way to do the grouping, so let's do that. If I undo, which is Control Z, and move these back to where they were, if you select both like this, you can do a center and another center right up here in the properties panel, which is right below menu. So that'll show up right there for you. That's a slightly easier way to group them together if you don't have this interface. And then Control G to group them, and we're back at the same place we were. Control S. Next thing we want to do is copy them. The easiest way is to hold down the Alt key. Notice I still have them all selected. The group is right here. So it's still selected. Hold down Alt next to your space bar. Notice the two arrows. And I'm going to just click and drag over and then release everything. And it copied it. Do the same thing again. Hold down Alt, click and drag. Alt, click and drag, and then Alt, click and drag once more. I know it goes off the artboard. That's okay. Once we have them all done, select them so that we can move them over. I'm just going to move them to where it's close to the center here. See how it says center? There. And then we can click away from them, Control S. So we now have our 5 grids for our icons. The groups are here. We're going to collapse those like that so you can still get to them if you want. Okay? We're going to lock them and we're ready to move on to the battery.